Okay,
All
Chris.
right. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me here today. I'm excited to be here and to share some hopefully valuable information as you're working through your coaching cycles. I am Chrissy Beltran, and I'm just going to scoot my chat over because it always puts it in a very inconvenient place. So that way I can hopefully see if you have any questions for me throughout the session, please let me know. I'm happy to answer anything. And you can also they already introduced, you're welcome to email me at chrissy@buzzingwithmissb.com or check out the website and search for whatever questions you've got. But please, I'm happy to help. So today we're looking at coaching cycles in motion. And I think this is such a good topic because it can become very easy to get stuck on the theory and not so much the practice. So just to share with you briefly, I was a literacy coach first. I became an instructional coach, and now I'm a consultant, resource creator, and a podcast host of Instructional Coaching with Miss B. That podcast is on its sixth season. So there are tons of episodes for you to dig through and find support if you need it. Today, we're going to look at a few main points. These are our objectives for the day. We're going to make a plan to initiate coaching cycles. We're going to provide effective feedback using data and evaluate and reflect on coaching cycles. And so I know that sounds like a lot. So so again, any questions are welcome. As we go through each of these objectives, I'm going to point out where it fits into your 5 coaching functions, because I know this is what you're centering your work around. And I know it can be kind of confusing to get lots of information and not really know how it fits with what you've already received. So we're going to point out exactly where it belongs into your 5 coaching functions. So hopefully this will, help you initiate. So the first one we're going to look at is making a plan to initiate coaching cycles. And based on what I read through your coaching functions, I'm seeing that it fits really well with providing professional learning and coaching, because actually initiating those cycles, that's where you're going to provide that one-on-one coaching. You got to get them started with your teachers. And the hardest part can be getting them started, because it can be daunting and overwhelming. I know many people here serve different roles, that they're not all, instructional coaches who serve only that one role. And so the work that I'm going to share today is going to involve different strategies. Some of them are going to work for some roles and some people, some will work for others. So I hope that you kind of latch onto the ones that'll work best for you in your position. So the first one that I'm going to share is a basic, something that is done mostly by instructional coaches, but it can also be done by interventionists who serve this role, really any support staff member who also has a coaching role. The idea is you're going to explicitly introduce your role, and you can do it with a fun event, something like coffee with a coach, where you have coffee, cookies with a coach, cupcakes. People do this in different ways, but basically you are enticing people to come meet with you, and you are explicitly introducing your role as a coach, regardless of what your main role is. The role you're serving as a coach is a special and unique one, and teachers can be unsure about that and maybe mistrustful whenever they're getting started with you. So it's really good to explain exactly what your role will be as a coach, what kinds of information will be gathered, what the coaching cycle will be like, and then you really want to get to know your teachers and what they're interested in working on. This is a really good opportunity to focus on goal setting, which I know is one of the things that you focus on in your 5. I can't think of the word. Functions, your 5 functions. So really getting to know teachers and what they're interested in working on in terms of the context that you're looking for is such a good way to motivate teachers to working with you. And one of the ways that I've done this is just a 4-square response. And you can put different things in those 4 squares. On the picture is an example of some of the statements that I have started with, but you can change those up, because some people don't love the question about something I've seen a coach do that I don't like. They don't always love that. You maybe want to replace it with something else. One question I have, one thing that I've tried that isn't working, one thing I've tried that is working. You really just want to get to know how they're thinking about their practice and how they are kind of applying some of the work that you're doing together, so you can get a picture on what they could work on next. And that's your doorway. That's your opportunity to say, I can help you with that. Another method for getting teachers actually to initiate or to get them engaged in coaching cycles is to give them a survey. And I mean, a survey can be done at any point in the year, but you want to know, similar to what was on that 4-square, but from every person on your faculty, what their interests are, what their challenges are, any plans that they are trying to initiate, possibly to address your school initiatives around behavior, any things that they want to try, any things that they've tried that are not working and that are working. And this is a really good way to get some feedback about the work that you've done together. It's a good thing to do after a PD It's a good thing to do after a PLC meeting. That can help you frame not only your individual coaching cycle work, but your whole school work. Obviously we need information from teachers to see what's working and what's not, so we can come back to that and revisit it in different ways and different learning opportunities. But the nice thing about using this for coaching cycles is that it tells you what that individual teacher needs. And then you can approach them and say, hey, I saw that you're working on this. I would love to support you in that. Hey, I noticed you had a question about this. I actually have a resource that we can try out. Would you like to try it? Or another one that I love is, hey, I saw that you have a question about this. So-and-so is working on that same thing. Would you like to go see what they've done? And then you set up a classroom visit for that teacher to go visit the other teacher. So you're just creating opportunities for you to follow up on with teachers. You're starting the conversation by figuring out where they are, and then you're going to say, I can help you with that in these ways as a school leader. You can also have teachers just write about their challenges. And this can come in a PD or a PLC meeting. But writing about our work, I think, is so important. And sometimes that is an opportunity that we're missing because that doesn't feel like something a lot of people do during professional development or PLC meetings. But in reality, writing helps us think. And sometimes the truth can come out when we write it. So if you can ask them give them sit-in starters or give them some questions to respond to in a quick write structure or a response structure that has sit-in starters already embedded, you're just asking them, what do you see that is not working for you? And you're having them write about it, and then they can share. And sometimes getting things on paper first will open people up to talking about challenges that they're having that they didn't really want to talk about before. Another one to use at the end of a PD or a PLC meeting is a sticky note commitment. It's easy, it's very small, and you're just saying, what are you going to do based on what we did together? What is a commitment you can make? And these are some sit-in starters that you can use. I know the recording, you're welcome to screenshot. That's fine if you want these. But you're just asking them to reflect on what they've done with you and what is something that they're going to implement, because then you can step in and say, I can help you implement this. Yes, I did share the slide deck. Crystal has it, I think, and she's going to upload it to the shared folder. So you can grab it all there as well. So you can step in and say, I saw that you wanted to commit to do this, and I would absolutely love to see that in action in your classroom. Can I stop by and see that? What day are you teaching that? And you want to be positive, and you want to be supportive, and you also want to be relentless. You want to be like, I am coming to visit you. What is the best way to make this work? I would love to see this. So how can we make it work? You want to give the teacher some flexibility, but you also want to be like, this is the support you're getting from me. Getting teachers into cycles can be overwhelming. And so I recommend that you start with a friendly. And a friendly, people call them different things. Some people call them the runners. The friendlies are the ones who are friendly to you, friendly to the work you are doing. They have a classroom environment that is focused enough for you to provide specific support instead of like trying to do everything from the beginning. If you walk into a room that doesn't have any of the things in place that you've worked on, it's very overwhelming to start there. And I wouldn't recommend it. And it's overwhelming for the teacher as well. And it also makes that teacher feel like, oh, you're here because I'm not doing things well. Instead, we want to start with somebody who has some things going on that other teachers maybe even look to as a leader or as a champion. And that can be the person that gets the wheels rolling on your coaching work. Because if you start getting into classrooms where you're having to push into those classrooms, that's whenever you're going to see a lot of resistance. And that's not going to help you build any momentum. You want to build momentum with your coaching work. So keep it simple. When you get started on a coaching cycle, you're going to focus on one thing, a goal that the teacher has selected, ideally, especially when you're first getting started. Start with those teacher selected goals. Focus on that one thing throughout your coaching work. You're going to communicate and collaborate throughout the process. You're creating a partnership to learn together and to really get teachers to apply something and reflect and think. This is the learning cycle with a teacher. You want to keep it very connected to classroom work, and I'll share some examples of the kind of classroom work that you can do in just a minute. And you want to go back to the goals that they wrote on their surveys or on their commitment stickies or whatever method you use. You want to return back to that for that dialogue where you set those goals, because that's where they express what it is that they needed support with. And so this is 5 different models of classroom coaching support. So I know you've talked about your coaching cycle. You have a pre-conference where you do your goal setting, you have the classroom work portion, and you have a post-conference where you're going to have a reflective conversation. So kind of think about these different opportunities. These are going to be available to different people in different roles. As an instructional coach, I've used all 5. As a principal, modeling might not be as available to you. It might. I have had principals who modeled. It just depends on lots of factors. But these are 5 different ways that you can approach your coaching work. And these are all high impact in the classroom because they're happening with real students and with real teachers.
Can you hear this right now?
Can I hear you? Yes. Do you have a question for me? No? Okay. Okay, so this is these are the 5 different ways you can approach your work. And observation, obviously, is the teacher is teaching and you are observing. And it's a good way to get a baseline. But if a teacher is a little overwhelmed with your coaching support offer, might not be the most comfortable way for the teacher to start. So you have to consider that as well, teacher comfort to get started if you're trying to build your momentum. Modeling means that you are going to model a lesson, they are going to observe and record their observations and questions, and you're going to have a conversation afterwards. Co-teaching, you're going to do these things together. And I recommend highly that you plan the lesson together. If you don't plan it together, you really can't teach it together. It's just a nightmare. And then you're going to have your conversation afterwards. Visit a colleague is extremely powerful and often overlooked because I feel like people feel like we have to do these whole instructional rounds to get into classrooms, and like 5 people go visit one teacher and we talk about a problem of practice, and that's great. But that is not always easy to do and easy to schedule. And that's a whole that's a whole special process. This is where you take one teacher and you have them visit one classroom, and then they have a conversation with you afterwards. That is so powerful because that teacher is seeing things happen with real children in a real classroom right down the hallway. So they can't say, well, these kids, right? They're all the same kids, guys. It's all the same school. And then the last one that you can do is video coaching, which can also be very powerful because a teacher can see their own work in action. They can see what kinds of things they do, what kinds of responses they have, and that can be very eye-opening. Again, it can be a little uncomfortable for teachers. And if they are really uncomfortable starting that way, start somewhere else. Maybe visiting a colleague is a good way to get started. But if you can use video coaching in your coaching, it is so impactful because it is very eye-opening. Seeing ourselves do really anything, we don't realize all the things that we do. It's like whenever people hear themselves on a podcast for the first time and they're like, is that what I sound like? It's shocking to see ourselves teach, even more so in front of students. So that's really helpful. Karen says her lead teacher during internship videotaped her and it was so hard to look at, but it taught her so much. I can imagine, oh my gosh, if I had been recorded as an intern, the things they probably would have pointed out to me, it would have been probably rough, right? It takes time to learn. I feel like my first year of teaching, I was playing school, looking back, right? So these are the 5 different kinds of classroom support. So as you're going into your coaching cycle work with a teacher, you're identifying your friendly, you are figuring out what you're going to work on together, hopefully based on teacher goals, and you're identifying the kind of classroom support that you can provide to that teacher as part of that cycle. You also want to set a date for your post-conference before you even get into the cycle, because if you don't set the date up front, time will pass. And it's all that learning is potentially gone. If the teacher didn't implement it themselves, all the reflection opportunities, there's nothing fresh anymore. It's like data. New data is relevant, old data is not so relevant, right? We want this to be relevant information. So we want to make sure we schedule that post-conference very quickly. Crystal says she used to jokingly tell people to watch the video twice, the first time to get past how they sound and the second time to watch your actual teaching. That is such a good point. So distracting just looking at yourself first. So I think that's not a bad idea. I love that. So these are some first steps that you can take as you are initiating this process with your teachers. And I just want you to think about which possible teachers you have that you can start with, what opportunities you have in your role. If you're thinking about visiting a colleague, who might they visit? Has anyone expressed a need for support with you that you feel like you can provide to get started? Who would be a good selection? And really think about how you can initiate this conversation with your teachers. So if you have any thoughts or questions on this, I would love to hear from you. If you want to put that in the chat box, I'm happy to answer those, or you can answer each other's questions. Obviously, you're a wonderful source of information for each other. But do you have thoughts on who you would start with? Do you have thoughts on what kinds of coaching support you can provide, given your current role? Do you have a place where you can initiate the conversation? What are you thinking about these first steps so far in relation to your work?
I agree. I think it's important for us there's a fine line of wanting to coach with the teacher, but if they seem unwilling, then there's got to be some understanding that I want to improve, and it's a team effort on that. So I think that'll probably be the most difficult thing for me is if sometimes a teacher is struggling, I'm worried they're not going to want to do this. And so I think building that relationship is key to show them the why. This is why we want them to improve. And one of the ways I do that is to say, you want your kids to learn. And so in order for that to happen, we need them to behave the best they can. So that's kind of what we're doing.
That's a really good point, is to focus on the student behaviors that we desire. Every teacher wants something that is not happening in their classroom. Everybody. There's nobody who says, everything's amazing, my kids are perfect, we get through all the content and everybody learns at 100%. Nobody is there. So where are the gaps, right? The teachers can look at their students and see what areas of need there are. And if they can start with that, then you can say, I can help you with your kids to be able to do that. Let's see what adult changes we can make to help kids do the things you want your kids to do. And that's called student-centered coaching. If you look at the work of Diane Sweeney, she's a very good resource for student-centered coaching. And I do recommend checking her out. She has a book called Student-Centered Coaching, The Moves, and it's a really good way to get started. It talks about specific strategies you can use in the classroom and how you make it very focused on what students can do and what you want them to do. So it's not so much like, oh, you're not doing this, you're not doing that. It's more the kids, we want the kids to do this, so let's try this. That's a good way to get started with a teacher who is less excited about your help.
And I think how you share that information leads to planning that conversation. It's important to identify those strengths and balancing it with an opportunity for growth. So I like how you kind of describe that, because in essence, you're covering all of those steps 1 through 3.
Yes. Yeah. As an opportunity to grow with students, we're doing all these things, right? We're identifying what they need to work on, what the conversation can be. We're focusing on the kids, and that takes a lot of the pressure off of the teacher, but we're still doing those other things that we have to do. Video coaching. Yes. Sunshine. It's such a good resource for us, and it's so much easier than it used to be to do. So we should really take advantage of this that we have available to us. Stephen, one element that we did when I was a school leader was to have a new mantra of, we are all both coaches and mentees. Yes, everybody needs and deserves coaching to do and be better. Sometimes there's a tendency to coach only when there is deficiencies, so having that coaching culture helps too. 100%. If you are designating a coach, or if you are only working with struggling teachers or new teachers, you are not going to see progress, because those people don't want to be on that list. In the day, whenever we had the bluebirds and the, crows and the ravens, nobody wanted to be a crow or raven or whatever was, vulture, whatever the bottom bird was in the breeding groups, right? Nobody wanted to do that. Well, that's the same thing that we do whenever we say coaches only support struggling or new teachers. Coaches need to grow teachers across their campus, and that any school leader is working with teachers across their school, and everybody can grow in a specific area. So we have to provide support in those areas. Andrea, thank you so much. I really appreciate your words, and I am so happy to be here too. So any other questions about this or comments that you'd like to share before we go on to the next piece?
I was just going to say, I like the idea of identifying who to start with, the friendlies, because I think as a coach, you can kind of get discouraged when you think you're helping and you're giving some positive feedback or you're giving strategies, and it doesn't seem like people want to take your help. So bells about to ring, sorry. But just starting out with people who really want the coaching, or they are in a place where they are welcoming feedback. It just kind of motivates you, and then it helps you fine tune yourself as well as you approach the more challenging situations. So I like that idea.
That's a really good point. The idea of, we develop our process and we get better at this so that when we get in those stickier situations, we have some more tools to use. That's such a good point, because starting in the sticky situations, I was told to go start in the sticky situations when I started coaching, and it is rough. And I mean, you get baptized by fire, I guess, but nobody wants to be baptized by fire, and nobody wants to be alongside you while you're going through that either. If you're just getting it started, start with friendlies, and then you obviously need to support every teacher on your campus, even the ones who are not really wanting it, but you can at least build the momentum, have some routines in place, make it clear that everybody gets support, not just a few, and that changes the culture a little bit, makes it easier to work with teachers for sure. Okay, so the next piece we're going to look at is, let's see. Oh yeah, thank you, Stephen. Some of my resources are free. I think I shared a handout with Crystal, a link to a handout, and it's pretty lengthy. It's got a lot of different resources for coaching cycles, so that should be helpful as well to get you started. Okay, so we're going to look at providing effective feedback using data. And so this is, I did my little arrow, right? Oh, where did I put my little arrow? I'm sorry, the chat box doesn't let me move it easily. Provide professional learning. Okay, and learning and coaching. Again, we're going to look at data in terms of student behavior, and we're going to use that to provide our feedback instead of providing maybe our own personal beliefs about behavior or management or anything else. So we want to start with a very specific purpose that we are going to collect data on. Coaching cycles need to be focused on the one teacher goal, right? If we try to collect data on everything, we are not going to be able to provide them with anything useful. It's way too much. You want to record evidence around that one thing. So if you're doing an observation, if you're doing visit a colleague, if you are doing video coaching, if you are actually modeling the lesson, the teacher's recording this evidence on you, about you. If you're co-teaching, you're finding some way to record evidence and observational, data about outcomes while you're teaching, right? And that could be one of the things co-teachers do. One can record data while the other one is doing something. We want to make sure we have information. And so if we can record evidence around that one thing, then we can share the evidence with the teacher and let them have an idea of this is what's actually going on in your classroom that you might not be able to see. So the data teachers can't gather on their own. That's what you're there to do, right? They cannot see it from whenever they're teaching. You can, you're another pair of eyes. So you want to start by sharing the positive data, and then you can actually move into things that maybe a little more growth, to the areas that teachers need to grow in, but it's based on the facts that you recorded. You can use specific data points that you recorded to pose questions and then discuss how outcomes could be different if we did something different. And this is also a place to address inequity, because inequity will often show up in your data. You might notice, we're calling all of the students of one gender and not the other gender. We are noticing misbehaviors of these students and not these students. We are responding in this way to this student and not that student. Why? And those questions that you're asking can help get to the root of inequity and help teachers become aware of the way that we're responding differently in different situations. So this is just a sample of one kind of data collection you could do for behavior. There's lots of different ways to collect data, and I'm sure in this group you have lots of resources about this, but I just kind of wanted an example. So this is like the ABC data collection, the antecedent, behavior, and consequence. And so if you are a coach observing in a classroom, you can actually record the specific behaviors that students are demonstrating, what came before, what is the consequence or the result of that behavior. And then these are some questions that you might ask to guide the teacher in reflecting. So the feedback is really, this is what happened. Let's talk about what happened. What can we do to make a better, more positive outcome in our classroom? And over time, you can develop those positive habits. These are just sample questions that I would ask based on the data collection, but you need to choose the ones that would be most relevant to what you're trying to accomplish. These are some more general questions that you can ask about really any kind of data. So like, can you tell me more about this? What do you think? Why do you think this specific event happened? This is something I noticed. Why do you think that was the outcome in this situation? Asking things like, what have you tried that worked? What have you tried that hasn't worked? So we don't try that same thing again. Giving the teacher the reflective power is so important, because that's a habit that we want to build all the time. As teachers go, oh, when I do this, this happens, and that's not what I want to happen. I'm going to change my response. So real quickly, if you want to share what kinds of data collection could be helpful to teachers, and then that would serve to create reflection opportunities. Do you have any quick thoughts on that you want to put in the chat box to kind of share a little bit about the data that you have collected about management and behavior, things that you could collect. Like I talked about ABC, that's really focused on maybe a specific student, but what about like classroom data? What kinds of classroom data could you collect that would be helpful to teachers in looking at their own practice? One easy one is a seating chart. And depending on what you're looking for, maybe you're looking for positive feedback from teachers. You do tallies. How many times did each student receive positive feedback? Maybe you're looking for redirection. How many times was each student redirected? Tally, 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 tally. How many times did each student participate verbally? How many times did each student follow directions the first time? It depends on what you're looking for, but a seating chart is a really good way to differentiate across your classroom, and then you can notice patterns from that information. That's one way to focus on every kid while getting the whole thing. Okay, I thought I had about 5 minutes. I was checking I've been looking at my phone to make sure. Thank you. Okay, let's see. We're in the process of walkthroughs looking at how teachers provide students opportunities to respond, verbal, gesture, and technology. I love that. So that's some data you could absolutely collect. How many opportunities did students have to respond in each of these ways? That's a really great focus. It's very specific. It's something that you could do in any classroom. I love it. And teachers, if that's what you're working on, hopefully they've been thinking about it, but they might not realize, maybe some different kinds of balance that happens. Are kids actually responding? Do they have the tools that they need to respond? That kind of thing. Okay, so the last objective is evaluate and reflect on coaching cycles. And this one is a very brief one. And that I kind of assigned that to assess knowledge and implementation, because you're assessing the implementation of your coaching work. A couple of ways to do this. You want to follow up with a survey a few weeks later. After your coaching work together, you can ask what has been implemented and what the effect has been, because what we sometimes see is people do really great work with the coach leaves, work goes away. So you want to, just a note, make sure that you're developing systems that teachers can use to continue the work after you're gone. But, just in case, either way, we need to follow up and see, is it still working for you? You also want to ask about what changes they would make to the coaching process. Like one of the guests mentioned a few minutes ago, we want to talk to them and say, this is how it's going. What adjustments could we make to the process? And that will tell you what kind of adjustments you can make in the future to make things more impactful for other teachers. That's kind of evaluating your actual work as a coach. Another way to do this is a little more database, because it's good to get teacher impressions and it's good to get information, facts. You can create a checklist of what you want to focus on and visit all your classrooms. I've done this before with a leadership team. Different little groups of people took different classrooms and we swept through the school and recorded our observations. Just, what do we see under each category? We reviewed the data to identify patterns and identify the next area of focus for our whole school PD, for differentiated PLC meetings, and for individual coaching work. And then you also want to ask yourself, okay, I've been in these classrooms. I've been in this, and this room. Is there a difference in these classrooms? Am I seeing a difference based on the data that I'm collecting? Another way to do the classroom sweep is to actually create percentages. So you do the same thing, you have your simple checklist, but what you're doing is you're saying, is this in place? How often of the time is this in place? And you're actually recording with number data, not just observational data. You want to mark whether things are present or not, whether you see something in action or not, and then you can actually calculate percentages and figure out where to go next with your support. And that's another way to do it. That way it's also imperfect. Both ways are imperfect. Just because it's a number doesn't mean it's perfect. But it can be helpful to show, okay, I saw this in action a lot and not so much this. So the things that you're going to do to take action are, you're going to want to choose a teacher who seems open to working with you, identify collaboratively a goal for students to achieve during your work together, identify the best mode of support. There's modeling, co-teaching, and observing, but of course there's also video coaching or visit a colleague. Schedule your cycle, including the post-conference, and know that this process will become more comfortable for you over time as you practice, and you'll work with different teachers in different ways. But this is how you're just getting started. This is the initiation. So last question, what is the first thing you could do to implement this when you return to your school? As you're thinking about what this work is going to look like, what is the first thing you can commit to do based on what we talked about today? Do you have any commitment that you'd like to share? I'd love to see in the chat box. And they can be big commitments or small. It doesn't have to be like, I'm going to go through every classroom and record data on every single room. Maybe that's not in the cards. That's okay. You can simply say, I'm going to approach that one teacher I know will work with me. Thank you, Georgia. Review the tools you've shared and see how they could fit into our work. Yes, I like that. You want to make sure that it's going to be aligned with what you're doing and then figure out which ones are going to work with you at your school. That's perfect. You also may share this with a leadership team. You know, if you have a team of people working on this at your school, maybe this is something you need to go back and have a dialogue about and say, okay, how do we want to initiate this? Sometimes things are not as effective when we over systematize them because we're trying to do everything, but it can be helpful to get input. See, I plan to implement the 4-square tool for teacher reflection and feedback. I love that, Tara. Thank you, Stephen. One of the strategy sheets. Oh, great. Annabelle, have a teacher in mind, review all of this material and think about the approach and best way to implement this with that teacher. Yes, get started with one. Think about how you can build the bridge to that teacher. Yeah, I plan to share with our school psych coach to support consultation. Oh, I love that. Yeah, use your resources. And your faculty are your best resource. Your specialists. Let's see. Oh yeah, that's a good idea. You could share. Yeah, the videos and the resources that I sent over with Crystal, you can share those as well. And if you have any questions for me, of course, I am available here. You can find me at any of these places. Podcast new season starts on Monday. And check me out on social media at Buzzing with Miss B or my website. And then, of course, you have my email address, Chrissy@buzzingwithmissb.com. So thank you so much for having me here today.
Thank you so much, Chrissy. This has been wonderful, and I really appreciate your being willing to share some of your knowledge, experience, and resources with us and our team. So thanks very much for being here with us.
Yeah, thank you for having me, and good luck. I hope that everybody tries it out and really enjoys working with your teachers.